Well, welcome to the three of you. It's great to have you here at the Asia Society. I thought we'd begin maybe by asking Adi just to sketch out for you a little bit about how the book that we're here to discuss came into being, and then maybe let Bao Pu tell you a little bit more about its genesis within China and the role that he played. And finally, have Ambassador Lord give us some general comments about this period with which he was very familiar. So, Adi?
Okay, thanks. Well, probably a lot of these details are familiar to many of you, but I'll just sort of sketch out a little bit of history and exactly how this book came into being. So, 1989, June 4th, the crackdown comes. Zhao Ziyang at this point was already out of power when he had. He had fought the hardliners in, the highest level of the party during the student protests. He had argued for a relatively lenient line. He was not listened to when the decision was made to declare martial law, which eventually led to the violent crackdown. He refused to sort of line up and go along with it, and at that point, his career was done. And he was pretty much out of the decision making from this is mid-late May until June 4th, and was out of it, was sitting in his courtyard when the tanks and troops moved into Tiananmen Square, June 3rd and 4th. So at that point, from that point on, he lived under house arrest at his courtyard home in Beijing, he occasionally was able to have visitors. He occasionally was able to travel, but frequently both were denied. And actually in the book he talks about the kind of really almost comical, Kafkaesque attempts to keep him from doing normal things like going out to see somebody or going out to play golf or something like that. So he spent the last 16 years of his life at home under house arrest. And it was assumed that he never left a final testimonial, never was able to leave his take on what happened during 1989 and what happened during his years in Beijing. And it was assumed he didn't because he was under tight surveillance, or he didn't because he was too bitter, too broken, too frustrated. There was a trickle of material that had come out, people who had visited him, who had spoken to him and written up some of the conversations. But basically, it was assumed that Zhao didn't leave his story. And obviously the book is the kind of incredible discovery that he in fact did for, secretly under the nose of his captors, he recorded 30 hours of tape. Some of and Bao Pu can probably add to this later, but a lot of it, he didn't have fancy recording equipment. He wasn't able to, he had to do this surreptitiously. His family says they did not know that he was making the recordings, which he made around the year 2000, give or take. We're not even sure exactly. He used tapes that were lying around the house. Apparently some of them were Peking opera tapes that the family had, or children's music tapes that his grandchildren had. So he taped over these. Mostly sitting alone. I think the first few were with some friends. I think Bao Pu can talk later about who the people were that he trusted with the material and how it made it outside of China. But he made these recordings. He didn't exactly specify what was to be done with them. On the other hand, he meticulously numbered them all. There are passages when he's speaking where clearly he wants to be speaking to the great world out there. And clearly, the judgment was made that he expected and intended these to be compiled into a book and published for the world to read. He did not, as far as I know, he did not leave explicit instructions, but implicitly it seemed quite clear. So he made the recordings. He then, he did entrust a few people to smuggle them outside of the country. And eventually, and Bao Pu could talk about this, they were kind of reassembled, compiled, translated, edited, and turned into the book. I'll just say, the hero on this stage is definitely not me, but is Bao Pu, who really, this was his life ambition, but it was something that Bao Pu has wanted to do for years, wanted this day to come where this would be published, set up a publishing house in Hong Kong, publishing miscellaneous books. I think it's fair to say, really, to have a publishing house operating for the time this book could come out, and then he could publish it, which is exactly what he did. And he and his wife, Renee, who's not here today, sadly, did the translation. Where do I fit in? I had known Bao Pu, my wife, Linda Elliott, and I had known Bao Pu for years. And, I think it's fair to say Bao Pu needed someone like me who, had a kind of journalist take on things, could write that kind of introduction, could help polish the text, could, help find a publisher. There are a couple of people from Simon & Schuster who jumped in early and said, yes, we want to do this book, and that was a great thing. So that was my role, and this was a secret that we had kept for about a year and a half, maybe, before publication, fearing that if the Chinese government knew about this, they would do whatever it took to try to stop publication, including presumably squeezing Zhao's family, and family members are still living in China, doing business, squeezing them in whatever way they could to just say, do whatever you can to make sure this book doesn't come out. So we, have been communicating with, heavy-duty encrypted email technology, and not saying anything on the phone, and really there was only a very, very small circle of people who knew about this until it sort of broke in the media a week before publication. So, with that, I will turn it over to Bao Pu.
Well, he actually covered the most of it. I actually running out of things to say.
Sorry about that.
Yes, but my motivation actually is really not from my vision of this publication, but from pressure, and the pressure is from Oral. Brought up a very, very interesting question, whether history was relevant even, to today. And from my personal, point of view, history is highly relevant, and not only is relevant, but I was pressured, to revisit what happened, to revisit, events, that I actually did not personally experience. When the time it happened. I remember in 1989, I was senior year in college, and I remember the day, my father was gone, and I knew that he had something to do with what's happening on the streets. And a few days later, I saw, what happened in Beijing Muxudi, where the confrontation between the military and the people on the street like me happened. I wasn't even sure about the precise connection between what happened to my father and what happened to things actually on the street. On the street, I just felt like, okay, and all these people were there and doing nothing wrong. When actually you met with pure violence, then your first reaction is anger, and that's basically what happened that night on the street of Beijing on the night of June 3rd. And it wasn't, shortly after that, I was forced, to basically alter my life plan. I came to the States, and I was forced, to relearn actually what happened to me and what happened to my family. So during this process, I actually, discovered, Zhao as a political leader, as someone that actually was, associated with that. My father had, working relationship with him, which I didn't actually quite understand, at the time. And I was able to revisit, the entire course of, event in the 80s, in the so-called reform. So history was actually, relevant to me personally, and that period of history, and I thought it should be relevant, to everyone else just like me, right?